Hey guys, last time that you were reading about things, you're reading about Caesar, Julius Caesar, versus Pompey Magnus. So that's what you were reading about last time. And now we're going to continue from our readings with the rest of the story. If you guys would, let's make a new section title. So we're going to write down after the death of Caesar, and we're going to underline that. So go ahead and write down your notes after the death of Caesar, and then go ahead and underline. So, as I said, we're going to talk about what happened after the death of Caesar, which you read about, and we're going to continue with the story from there. And so, talking about after the death of Caesar, before I get to covering the stuff that happened after the death of Caesar, I'm going to cover some of the events that happened after the defeat of Pompey at the Battle of Phasaelus to the time of Caesar's death. All right, so I'm going to cover some information there. This right here, this is a flag where it says SPQR. That's a flag for the Roman Republic. So whenever you see this flag, that just means the Roman Republic flag is this. All right. So let's talk about a couple things that happened after Pompey's defeat at Phasaelus. So, like you read about, after Pompey is defeated at the Battle of Phasaelus, he goes to the country of Egypt to try and get refuge there with Ptolemy. Ptolemy is the current pharaoh of Egypt. So Pompey goes to Egypt to try and stay with the pharaoh of Egypt, Ptolemy, and try to raise up in their army. However, Ptolemy decides instead that he is going to have Pompey killed and then present Pompey's head to Caesar. So when Caesar arrives in Egypt and he talks to the pharaoh Ptolemy, Ptolemy, who's only 12 at this time, okay, so he's 12 years old at this time, he so Ptolemy then gives the head of Pompey to Caesar as a gift. Caesar is actually not very happy with the fact that Ptolemy had killed Pompey and cut off his head and given it to him as a gift. He's actually pretty ticked off about this. From historical records, either one, he was pretending to be ticked off by this because he needed the people that were loyal to Pompey to rejoin him so that he could then have com- more control of Rome. Because right now he had people that weren't working with him; they're working against him, and he needed those people that were loyal to Pompey to come over to his side. So part of the thinking of why he was ticked off at Ptolemy for killing Pompey was because Caesar needed the people that were loyal to Pompey to join him. And another thought about it is that Caesar is simply just ticked off that Ptolemy had killed Pompey because he had Pompey's head cut off, which is something you kind of do to someone who's a like thief, for example. All right, it's not generally something that you do to someone who's an important person like Ptolemy or Pompey. So, anyways, so Caesar's not very happy with Ptolemy, and what ends up happening is Ptolemy has an older sister, Cleopatra, and Cleopatra ends up sneaking into Caesar's room and talking to him. And when she talks to him, she's able to convince Caesar that instead of supporting Ptolemy, he should support her instead, and she'll become pharaoh of Egypt. So that's what Caesar decides to do. So he decides to go with Cleopatra against Ptolemy and support her against him. And he also ends up having a baby with Cleopatra as well. So there's that factor too. So what we have right here says siege of Alexandria in 48 before Common Era. So Caesar's in the city of Alexandria, which is at the mouth of the Nile River. It's on the opposite side of Damietta. All right, so we talked about before how Damietta is over here. Okay, Alexandria is over here on this side of the Nile River. Okay, so it's on the opposite side of Damietta that we talked about a whole bunch when we were talking about the Crusades. So it's over here, and it's the capital of Egypt. So that's where Caesar is. And what ends up happening is that Caesar, he's located in this area. He's kind of in the emperor's area, in Ptolemy's area. And eventually, when Caesar is supporting Cleopatra against Ptolemy, there's a huge then rebellion in the city against Caesar, and they're trying to like kick him out. And Caesar's kind of just defending this location. Eventually, Ptolemy puts together an army, and when Ptolemy puts together an army, another army for Caesar, who was marching from over here. So basically, Caesar is over in this area. He has a legion with him. It's not really a huge amount of forces. Ptolemy had gathered up some other troops, and he was going to try to kick Caesar out of Egypt because he was trying to get Cleopatra in charge of instead of himself. So Ptolemy was putting together another army. Eventually, reinforcements for Caesar end up arriving from over here. Caesar then joins up his reinforcements. So this is then called Battle of the Nile, which is in 487 before Common Era in February. So Caesar then battles Ptolemy on the Nile River in 48 before Common Era with the reinforcements that had arrived for Caesar. Caesar defeats Ptolemy. Ptolemy ends up drowning in the Nile River. Cleopatra is then made pharaoh of Egypt. So Cleopatra is now pharaoh of Egypt. After Cleopatra becomes pharaoh of Egypt, there's another problem. There's a guy up here, the Mithridates, who control this territory up here. They're coming down and they're trying to invade into Roman territory over here. So Caesar then has to go over here to battle against the Mithridates. When Caesar gets in the battle with the Mithridates, they're both up on a hill. So you have Caesar, he's on a hill, and the Mithridates, they're up on a hill. And with themselves both on a hill, what ends up happening, the Mithridates come off their hill and they're moving across over the hill of Caesar. And Caesar is kind of confused by this. He's like, well, I'm up on a hill, so I'm not moving. Like, I'm good where I'm at. And the Mithridates actually tries to attack Caesar going up a hill, which is really hard to do if you're marching up a hill and you're trying to maintain formations. And it's tiring. You got to walk up a hill. So they're going up the hill trying to attack Caesar. It doesn't work out very well. Caesar crushes the Mithridates and he finishes off that problem. However, there was another problem. The remnants of the people that were loyal to Pompey had gone over here to Africa, in this part of Africa, and they had gotten up a new army. And they were trying to, again, get a new army together so they could challenge Caesar. So then Caesar has to come over here into Africa. And then this is called the battle in Africa. Particularly, the battle ends at the Battle of Munda. Or sorry, not the Battle of Munda, sorry. The Battle of Africa, at the Battle of Africa, which is over here, Caesar again ends up winning, destroys the remnants. Well, destroys most of the forces that were loyal to Pompey, even though Pompey is dead. So most of them are destroyed. So at this point in time, the Civil War is mostly over, except Pompey had a son, and his son was named Gnaeus. Gnaeus had got another army together over here in Spain. So then Caesar had to come over to Spain, had to kill Gnaeus. And then after that, then everybody that opposed Caesar was pretty much dead at this point in time. All right. So he was fighting for quite a long time, just kind of finishing up people that were loyal to Pompey, that were still trying to rebel against his rule, and just kind of finishing them off one by one. And so in 45 before Common Era, there's no one that can really challenge Caesar anymore militarily. Caesar's power is under control. So he's under control now with power. So he has control of the area. However, that's where we need to pick up with some more notes. Go ahead and make a bullet and write down death of Caesar. So make a bullet and write down death of, or sorry, just bullet and just the word death. Bullet and just the word death. So now we're going to talk about the death of Julius Caesar and what ends up happening with him. So you guys already kind of read about this and how he was killed. But go ahead and make a 1 if you would. And we're going to write down 48 before Common Era, murdered on the eyes 15th of March. Go ahead and write that down for number 1. So we got bullet death, and then we got 1. 44 before Common Era, murdered on the eyes 15th of March. So what ends up happening is that since no one could really charge Caesar anymore militarily, the senators in Rome were concerned that he was going to strip them of their power as senators and simply rule Rome as a dictator and just have absolute control of the country all to himself. And therefore, we had two main people, Brutus and Cassius, who were planning to kill Caesar. So you have Brutus and Cassius. They then both kind of plotted against Caesar, and they both end up assassinating. Well, not really. I guess assassinating is the correct word. They both end up assassinating Caesar in the Senate House on March 15th of 44th for Common Era. As I said, the reason why they did so, they were concerned that he was going to get rid of the senators, which means they wouldn't have any power in the government, and then it would just be Caesar in charge. We're going to make it two, and we're going to write down Brutus and Cassius, the leading conspirators. So go ahead and make it two, and write down Brutus and Cassius, the leading conspirators. So Brutus and Cassius are leading conspirators. Caesar is stabbed multiple times in the Senate House by both of them. And when Caesar is killed, the Brutus and Cassius are both proclaiming they're like, "Hey, the tyrant is dead. We can return back to the Roman Republic." The problem with that is that you had Mark Antony. Mark Antony is Caesar's right hand man. Basically, he's been a major general for Caesar for quite a long time. The problem is Mark Antony has quite a lot of power, and there's also another guy called Lepidus who's like a senator, and he has like another legion of troops just outside of Rome. So there's a bit of a problem because even though Caesar's dead, Caesar still had quite a lot of loyalty of military troops to himself. All right, let me talk about who all of our characters are going to be in the story. Just kind of quickly go through who all they are. You had Octavian, that's Caesar's nephew, and that's his closest male heir. So his closest male heir to himself is Octavian. You have Mark Antony. Mark Antony is who person I just talked about. He's a major Roman general. You got Agrippa, that's Octavian's buddy. Agrippa is a good naval commander, so he's good with boats. You got Lepidus, he's a senator in Rome. He's a pretty important one. You have Octavia. That is Octavian's sister, older sister. So you have Octavian and Octavia. Octavia's the older sister, and Octavian's the younger brother too. And Octavia's a niece of Caesar, and Octavian's the nephew of Caesar. Not very clever names, Octavian and Octavia, but nonetheless. Cleopatra. So Cleopatra's the current pharaoh of Egypt. Cleopatra had a child with Caesar named Caesarion. So I guess when I said before Octavian's the closest male heir, it's actually Caesarion that's the closest male heir to Julius Caesar. Um, but Octavian is going to be written in Caesar's will. So there won't be anything in Caesar's will about Caesarion, but there will be stuff in Caesar's will about Octavian. Brutus is one of the senators that assassinates Caesar in the Senate. Cassius, the person that was plotting with them. Pansa and Hirtius are going to be two important Roman senators that are co-consuls of Rome, kind of like co-presidents, basically. Cicero, he's a famous senator in the area. We don't really know too much about him. Caesarion, that's Caesar's son with Cleopatra. And Secus Pompey is Pompey's other son. So Pompey still has another son out there. Okay. Now, Cleopatra happened to be visiting Caesar in Rome at the time period that Caesar is assassinated. She was actually in Rome. And when Caesar gets assassinated, she gets worried that that Brutus and Cassius are going to come for her next and try to murder Caesarion, since Caesarion is Caesar's son. So she gets worried, so she bails and she goes to Egypt. Go ahead and make it three. And write down Cleopatra and Caesarion return to Egypt. So for number three, Cleopatra and Caesarion return to Egypt. So the two of them end up returning back to Egypt. And there's a picture of Cleopatra down here in the right hand corner. So that's what Cleopatra, that's a picture of her. Not obviously from the time period, it's a modern day picture, but nonetheless. And Mark Antony, he's currently the major military power now in Rome. And so Brutus and Cassius are trying to get Mark Antony to work with them. So they go over to his house and they're talking to Mark Antony and they're talking to him about how I think they'll make him consul as Rome is what they're offering him. So they're hoping to kind of use Mark Antony to kind of reestablish power of the Roman Republic of the senators. And Mark Antony was kind of wishy washy about it. He's like, I don't know. And so what ends up happening is that then there's a big funeral for Caesar. So there happens to be then like a big funeral for Caesar. So you have like a stage. Yeah, there's my stage. And then you have like Mark Anthony, and he's on stage. And so, as I said, there's a big funeral for Caesar. Then here's a pyre of wood for Caesar's body. There, make Caesar. There's Caesar there. Okay, so in any case, so you had this like big funeral scene that was happening, and at the funeral, what ends up happening is that Mark Anthony's up there and he's talking, and there's some like other senators there as well. There's some other senators there as well, and when Mark Anthony's talking, he then is when he's talking, he then puts the blame of Caesar's death squarely on the senators. So the senators had tried to convince Mark Anthony to go with them, but then at the funeral of Caesar, Mark Anthony is talking in front of all these people, and he's then telling them about how these murderers, the senators, they killed Caesar in cold blood, which ticks off all the people that are here at the funeral. The senators are like, "Oh, this is how we thought things were going to go. We thought Anthony might work with us. He's plotting on murdering all of us." So the senators, boop, they get out of there. They leave real quick. So senators all bail. Mark Anthony then takes over control of Rome, and now Mark Anthony's in charge. So basically, the senators just whip this switch power from Caesar to Mark Anthony now. All right. So next time we're gonna pick up from there, and we'll talk about how Mark Anthony is in control now at Rome, and we have some senators that have left Rome now and fled. We got to talk about who Julius Caesar left all his money to. So we'll talk about that next time.